Hey friends, and welcome back to my channel. I've got some wonderful friends here today. We have Mazza, booktuber, Steve Talks Books, and author Jeff Lane here once again to discuss The Dark Tower. We are now on book 3, The Wastelands, and I have a lot to talk about for this one. And I know we have some mixed reviews. I've seen your reviews on Goodreads, so it'll be exciting to hear all of your thoughts. For those who don't recognize these gentlemen, we're going to do some quick intros. Let's start with you, Mazza.
All right, guys. Hey, guys. My name is Mazza. I have my own channel called Mazza Booktuber, and I do a lot of Stephen King content and like fantasy. And I've recently gotten into mangas. I have some manga stuff coming out, but yeah, I mostly just do a lot of Stephen King stuff.
Cool. I am Steve from Steve Talks Books and stuff, and I do a little bit of everything. I probably shouldn't, but you know, I don't know any better. So yeah, so I like to read and talk about books and talk to people, and yeah, so here I am. I'm glad to be a part of the group and having a great time.
And I am Jeff Lane. I am author of a few books out there. One Way, The Champion Saga, The Three Scrooges. And I do not review books with my mouth. For those who review with their mouth have forgotten the face of their father. I review with my heart. And can I add, just because this is very appropriate given the opening scene of the book, but I'm wearing a shirt that Steve got me with
cool.
Boxing Bear.
Nice, cool.
We are about to travel the path of the bear, way of the turtle. And congratulations to Mazza on his new baby.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Huge congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you could join us, because I remember being a new parent and there was very little time for anything except for beer.
I wish this were beer. I have to drive my daughter to a sleepover in a bit. So those celebrations start later.
We already have some great friends that are here joining us in the chat. We have David. Hey, David. And JB. And, of course, Brandy. Brandy can't join us today on camera, but we are glad that she could join us in the chat, because I know she has thoughts that she wants to share with us about the book as well. So I really don't know where to start. There is so much going on in this book, but we'll start with non-spoilers. If there is anybody here who has not read The Dark Tower, I don't know why you're here, because you're going to be spoiled for everything. But in case you wanted to just see us, say hi, we'll talk non-spoilers for a couple of minutes. So we're going to go in the opposite direction. Jeff, this is number 6-7 times that you've read this book.
Probably, yes.
So your brief feelings on your reread this time around?
So this one holds a special place in my heart, though it's not my favorite book in the series, but this is where I started. So odd place to start, but back in I think the summer of 1993, I was dating a girl who loved this book, and she's like, you got to read this book. I'm like, that's number 3, but all right, I'll read it. It's like a paperback version. And the argument at the beginning is this, is that previously on The Dark Tower, so you get caught up fairly quickly. And I read this book and was very delighted, and actually moved on from here. I think I read books 3 and 4, and then backtracked to 1, 2, and then read the series straight through. I actually had to wait for them to come out at a certain point because I was ahead of the curve. But some of you might be thinking, he read this in 1993, and he was dating a girl at the time. And how old is this guy? And the answer is old, very old. I heard you guys talking about your age on your reading sprint the other night. And yeah, I got you all beat, I think, by a few years. And we'll discuss how I keep my youthful looks in next week's review of Dracula, because it's kind of similar.
It's related.
It's related, tangentially.
Jeff came with the jokes today, like since we started. He probably has them all written down next to him. He's like, okay, this one, okay. I'm kidding, Jeff. I'm kidding.
I'm gonna let Brandy talk for a minute. She says she didn't like this one as much as the last one. It was only a 3-star until the end. Not a spoiler, but most confusion became clear. So hang in there. I have to agree on that. We'll get there when we start talking spoilers. So, Steve, what did you think?
Okay. Okay, so it's gonna sound harsh, but I didn't. I enjoyed the book. It was fine. I didn't hate it. Didn't love it. Where I got lost in this one was it reminded me a lot of It, because when I've tried reading It a few times, and it gets really long winded, and I just kind of get glossed over and kind of like start thinking about other things, and so it was fine. I enjoyed it. It wasn't great. It was okay, but I do see that it's building on other things to come. So there's some setup. So yeah, it was fine, and I really it was fine, but I know it's going to sound negative when I explain why I didn't like or why I did it. It wasn't my favorite, but it was cool. It was fine. It wasn't as good as I will say. I did enjoy the Gunslinger more than this one. This is my least favorite so far.
Okay.
But Steve,
So far.
time paradox. This is what you've been waiting for.
I know. I know. That's why it hurts so much to say it.
So, Mazza, this isn't your first time reading this one.
No, this is my second time, and I feel like the second time around, I enjoyed it a lot more than the first time. I feel like the first time that you read it, you, like Steve said, you are kind of like, okay, I get it now, because I feel like the first book is just getting you like into the story. The second one is character building, and this is like you start to see the world and the scope of it. And it's huge. It's a huge world that Stephen King is building, and it's not just one world. It's like a whole, like Jeff said, like it's time paradoxes. Like there's so many different timelines that you start to see, and I can't see why you might get lost here and there, just because he does like to give you a lot of detail on each little aspect. And I feel like the second time around, I enjoyed it a lot more than the first time, because I was like, oh, I didn't catch that the first time. So yeah, I feel like it was a great read for me this time, but it still didn't beat my favorite book so far the series. I'm only in the fourth book. Yeah, Wizard and Glass is the fourth book. Yeah, I'm barely on the fourth book, and I feel like for me it'd be like Wizard and Glass, and then this one. This one's up there too.
Oh, that makes me excited to move on to the next one. So we've got. I'm sorry, I grabbed the wrong one. So Joshua, thanks for joining. He says here, the Wasteland brought me back in after drawing of the 3 was a little disappointing. So I'll be honest with you guys. I thought drawing the 3 was going to be my favorite one. About a third of the way through this book, I was like, it's good, but I still really liked drawing it a 3, getting to know all the characters. And there was a lot of time you spent with Jake that it just felt like it dragged a little bit. But once that part was over, this was by far, I think that I liked it better than the second book. The time paradox was very interesting. That's why, Jeff, I had expected you to say it was your favorite, because I know how you like time paradoxes, and same with Steve. But it was confusing. The timeline kind of got muddled there, and I felt like it drew me out of the story just a little bit. So I couldn't give this book a full 5 stars. But I really enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of action in this one. The pacing was a little willy-nilly, though. It seemed like you'd get something really exciting would happen, and then it would drag out for a little while, and then really exciting. So you kind of felt like you're on a roller coaster. But it felt purposeful, almost like it was the same kind of thing with the drawing of the 3. Like every act in the story had its own build-up to something, and then it went on to the next act, and then there was a build up to something else, and they all kind of the last 3 books really did end in sort of a cliffhanger where you're like, nothing really. The thing about a long series like this, this is probably the only second book I've read that was more than 4 books. It's all build up, right? It's moving you towards the ultimate story for the whole series. But what Stephen King does really well is he gives you a little bit of payoff during the story. So you meet new people, events happen, and then they move on. The journey keeps going. But it's never just like Fellowship of the Rings, where you're walking for hundreds of pages and there's very little happening. Stephen King does a much better job with that journey trope, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought that you saw a lot more of the world. So the last drawing of the 3 spent a lot of time in our world. It was fun. It was interesting to see the world through Roland's eyes, because it was new to him. But it was really fun to get to spend almost an entire book in the Middle Land. So I really I really liked this one. So let's see. We got a bunch of people on here today. I'm going to have a hard time keeping up with the comments. I'm so sorry. Jeremy joined us. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy.
He says that he agrees with Joseph that the drawing of the three was a disappointment. I'm assuming that's what he means, and that he liked the Wastelands. Cozy with Quaker Cats couldn't join us today, but she is here in the chats. She thought it was happening tomorrow.
Plus, she said on her like on one of her most recent videos, she's got some internet bandwidth issues. I think she and her mom are fighting over bandwidth.
Oh, does she live near a Matt?
Yeah. Yeah, Matt.
So, I hope you enjoyed it, Cozy, your reread. Let us know what you think. You say you haven't finished it yet, but let us know what you think when you finish it. I don't know if this is your second time or third time reading this.
I think she had read up to the 4th or 5th book, if I remember right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Joseph says the Gunslinger is the best. That's so weird.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I love that these comments, in that everybody has such a different read on their favorite book or which book they like better or worse. Because you can go into this and you can tell your friend, like, oh, book 2, book 4, like you can give your opinions, but everybody reads them so differently, and each book speaks to people differently. And I love that. These comments are great.
So before we move on to spoilers, I have to ask a really quick question about the Wastelands, so that anybody else is on here. Jeff, it's interesting that you actually started here, because I kind of think that all of the information that you get in Gunslinger and Drawing of Three, of course, is very important to the story, but it's almost seemed like this was the real start of the journey. And so I almost think that it was almost like those two are prequels to this book. What did you think? You agree with that?
It's funny you said it, because that came out to me probably the strongest ever as I read this time, because you're right. Leaving that forest when they finally get on the path of the beam and leaving the forest, that really is the start of the journey. And Eddie says something to that effect, that this is where it begins, and we get reunited. I don't know. Are we tiptoeing into spoilers? Well, let me just say, we gather all of our players in our ka-tet. Like, our ka-tet is finally complete, including another new character that is very near and dear to many people's hearts, a little four-legged character. And so I agree with you. This is where it begins. Not to say the first two books don't have great stories, great build-up, but this, for our group, this is them leaving Munchkinland and heading off down the Yellow Brick Road, for sure.
I like that. That's a good one. Mazza, Steve, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. Yeah, that's what the first time that I read this around, I was like, huh. That's how I would describe it to people when I would when I would pitch it to my friends. I'd be like, yeah, just get over the Gunslinger, and then the second one is just character work, and then the third one is where the story finally kicks off. And I feel like that's what got me the most excited about this book, is that finally we get to see like what the heck we're doing, like what the world is like. Because at the beginning, I feel like in Gunslinger you did experience the world, you got to see it a little bit, but I feel like in this one you got to see the big old scope, because this is like, when I picture it in my head, I picture a humongous world, like the whole planet, and then plus more not more universes, more timelines. And then another thing that I think is really interesting is that a lot of people that like the Wheel of Time, I don't know if you guys have heard it, I'm pretty sure, I feel like they would love the Dark Tower, just because there's not a lot of similarities, but it is like a futuristic aspect with kind of like a medieval little thing in there, like back in the days, but we're in the future kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, you're kind of like stranded and you're living like how you would live back in the days, but you're in the future. Like, this is the future. This is not like back then. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes
Totally. Yeah.
It's one of those, it's like, it's so dystopian, it's fantasy. That makes sense.
Yes.
And it's such a mix of all this, because the world has moved on, and we know that there is great technology, but so far in the past that people have had to revert to old ways of living, old West ways, some medieval, some, you're right. So it's like really blending everything together, almost as if Stephen King, a constant reader himself, has said, I'm going to pull in a little bit of every single genre I've ever read and mush them together. And that's one of the reasons why I love The Dark Tower.
Yeah. All right, let's get into spoilers because I am hankering to hear all of your thoughts on. So by the way, as soon as I met Oi, I had to go look up images of what he looked like what fans thought he looked like, and that's by far my favorite character now.
Isn't it such a weird combination? It's a dog, a raccoon, and he can talk like a parrot. And I forget the other thing. Is like when I pictured it, I think I did a bad job of picturing him. But when I pictured like a wild hog, I don't know. That's what I pictured, maybe with like black stripes. That's what I pictured in my head. Maybe I was just being lazy with Oi. But yeah, he's pretty funny.
So Saf has joined us. Hey, Saf.
Hey,
I don't
Saf.
know if you're going to stick around or if you're reading these books, but thank you for coming. And Cozy says, I've read the whole series. This is her second time reading. Okay. Drawing 3 is still her favorite. When you start meeting characters that in books, that's really my favorite part of a book is getting to know the characters. I'm a very character-driven reader. But seeing these characters in a completely different environment, all of them are new. I mean, even there's a lot that even Roland is. There's been many years have gone between when he was in the desert and this point in time, and he even says that there were hundreds. I think he said like 100 years had passed when he was sleeping. So even the world is slightly different for him as well. So it's kind of neat seeing all of them try to survive in a strange land. So we get through these comments really quick. The wheel weaves, the wheel wills. Brandy, first of all, Susanna and Eddie are married. She has his last name. As a romance reader, I feel robbed of the wedding experience. Yeah, I totally understand that one, Brandy. So let's get into spoilers. I don't even know where to start, y'all. So I guess we'll start at the beginning where they are. This once again, Stephen King likes to start everything off with a bang. And so the very first couple of chapters, you meet the bear. Mm-hmm. So I had a really hard time picturing said bear. It seemed like everything, they were talking about the talons or the claws on the bear were 3 feet long. And I'm like, God, this thing has to be massive. But then Eddie was able to climb a tree high enough to be above the head of the bear. So I had a little bit of issue with the scene. What did you guys think of the scene? Somebody's got to start.
we're all waiting for each other to say.
No, I think I pictured like a grizzly bear, just like once we started seeing that he was like a robot bear. I don't know. I got excited at that point. And then even the second time around when I started reading it, I don't know. I like those futuristic kind of things, like where it's like it looks straight up like a real flesh bear, but at the same time it's not. And I was just like, and then all these other animals started coming in too, and I was like, but I feel like I kind of wanted to know more about like the bear and like everything else, because Roland does explain it a little bit, but I felt like King needed to give me more. Like I wanted to know more, and I feel like he does like kind of like slow down for details and other things. But I feel like if he would have slowed down a lot more in this scene, I would have loved it even more. I don't know what you guys think.
Jeff, what do you think?
Oh, well, this is the bear has always stuck out in my mind, Shardik, and I do agree with Stacy a little bit. The scale gets a little lost in my head, and it did from the first time I read it. First I was picturing like building like Stay Puft Marshmallow size, like that's. But then there are other times when I feel it must be like maybe twice as big as a regular bear. Like it was kind of hard to pin down. But some of my favorite images that stick out about him is the fact that he's like sneezing out these parasites. Yes. He covers Eddie with them, and they're squirming, but then they die off. Like that image stuck with me for years and years and years. And every time I have a cold, I kind of think that maybe might be happening to me. But yeah, and one of the things I also like about Shardik is that this is from like a nursery tale in Roland's childhood. And he kind of sort of believed these things might have existed or might have been myths, and here he's facing something from out of a fairy tale from his childhood, and he kind of takes it in stride. But you can kind of, you know, put yourself in his brain. Like if, I don't know, what's a fairy tale we have? You know, Big Bad Wolf and Red Riding Hood. Like if this all of a sudden we were faced with this in reality or something, that's what he's dealing with, and I think that's kind of cool. But then he knows right away, like, this is how I can find my way to the tower. This is another clue.
And that was one of the cool things about this part. Maybe, you know, I had issues with the scale of the bear and everything, but that's when you start, after this scene is when Roland starts explaining that the Dark Tower is in the center of this wheel-like world, and that they're on one of the spokes, and they have to follow this to the Dark Tower. So it kind of sets up for that, you know. And it's almost like you said, he comes across this, but it's the fear and the excitement kind of battle in him, because he knows, hey, if I made it to one of those portals, then I know we've got a straight line to the tower.
Yeah.
But also like this terrifyingly large robot bear. The fear that Eddie has is much more understandable than Roland's.
Yeah. Another thing I like about this scene, or even just backing up to it, is I love a good training montage. You know, put me in front of Rocky IV and let me watch him like work out in Siberia. You know, in that we get a little bit of a training montage with, you know, he's working directly with Susanna, and he's teaching her that gunslinger's credo, I do not aim with my hand, and all of that, which I love. Like anytime I see that in print, or if I hear it, like it just gives me the goosebumps. I love that. I kill with my heart. And he fires me up every time. But then we also know that Eddie's been doing some training, and you know, they're wearing their buckskin clothes and stuff like that. So we've had this little kind of montage and move on from where we left them at the end of book 2. And we're starting to see Roland go from the hero, the guy who's going to save them every time, to the teacher. So he's kind of turning into the Obi-Wan kind of role, and he's bringing up some Padawan pupils. And then throughout the book, he even introduces them when they come into River Crossing. And I'm jumping ahead, but he introduces them as gunslingers. So he's giving them that mantle. And I don't know, I just kind of I love origin stories and people training. I don't know, it just gets me giddy.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, same here. Especially like when it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm just weird like that, but especially origin stories for villains. Like that, those always get to me. Like where you get to see why a person's so freaking messed up. No one's like born that way. Like something has to happen to you. At this point, Steve, did you like start to like get excited, or were you just like, okay, this is just okay?
I was still on the drawing of the 3. I was still on the upswing. The bear was okay. It was fine. But it's a little bit more fantasy than I was expecting, and I read fantasy. I'm not complaining. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and it was a little bit more fantasy and less horror than I was expecting it to be. But no, I like the bear. I thought I did have issues with the scale, like Stacy does. But how can that huge of a bear do that? But it was okay. I mean, I don't have really strong opinions on that. So sorry.
Jeez, Steve.
I know it sounds really bad. It was okay. It just
Jeremy says there was a bear at the end of King's
yeah.
Book, the girl who loved Tom Gordon, and it reminded me of that. I really like the mini boss battles. That's funny you say that, because that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like they had these full boss battles throughout it. One of the things I have to make note of before we move on is I had expected more of the wastelands in the book called The Wastelands. So I was confused. I kept waiting. So I think that also kind of made it feel like it was dragging, even though now that I go back and think about it, there was really not a whole lot in between those mini boss battles. And, you know, it was kind of setting up for the mini boss battles. But I kept going, okay, we're going to the Wastelands yet. And then I'd look and be like, I only have 50 pages left. When are we getting to the Wastelands?
Yeah.
I think it was more of a like Me too. I was expecting, like, in my head, I pictured, like, I don't know, for some reason, I pictured like the Star Wars, like a wasteland in Star Wars or something, like where it's just dark and everything that goes there dies. But I think it was more of like the world that it was became just started to wasting away. Like, for example, the train just starts to slowly waste away. So it was more of like a, I don't know if this is the correct way, but a metaphor for the title more than like literally like a wasteland. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, keep in mind that the title is 2 words, wastelands. It's not wastelands.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
No.
So
there you go.
that kind of falls in line with what Mazza says.
Also, there was a line in here, and I'm not going to be able to find it because I didn't. They talk about the drawers, and I think the line in there said something about the drawers is something that has to do with the wasteland, and wasteland being 2 words and not capitalized, if I remember, because I remember going, I wonder if that, but I can't remember where it was. Jeff, you've read this 7 times. Do you remember that line?
Well, I have such a bad memory. That's why I have to read it 7 times.
I hope like Jeff just starts to like say the whole book. Like he's just like, okay, he just starts to read it off the top of his head. So it's just like off here and then.
Memorized.
You guys have the same version of the book, huh, Steve and Stacy?
Yeah.
I have this version.
That train looks a lot more evil than my train. My train just looks like an old train.
She's got me 69, page 69.
Oh, way to go, Summer.
Oh, look, this is kind of like what Jeff was talking about.
I wonder if it's 69 in her copy because I don't see it here.
And then like that's like I'm not gonna hate on the movie, but because I haven't seen it, but this is how I expected Roland to look. Like I don't know what you guys think. Like this is like overall for me. This is Roland.
Yeah.
And Susanna, yeah. But I love these pictures. Like I don't know if it's just because I'm a little kid, but I love to have pictures in my books. It helps tremendously.
I think I have that version, Mazza. That I have the same, I don't know what they call it, a deluxe trade or something like that of that in book 4, and it has those paintings in it, which are amazing.
I wish like I could get like some of the pictures. Like some of these pictures are really great. I wish I could like blow them up and like hang them around. Like take down maybe Elvis and Marilyn Monroe and put some of these pictures. Look, Stacy, there's your bear.
Yes. That's a scary friggin' bear. Okay, so the line is, the drawers are places of desolation. The drawers are the wastelands. So they pass through multiple places that can be considered the drawers. And I think they even talk about that. They, at first, when they got to the river crossing, they were like, this is the drawers. And then they get into the city and they're like, no, this is the drawer. And then it's once they get out and they're passing through the proper wastelands. No, it like the level of desolation just gets worse and worse and worse. So I really liked what Jeff was talking about with the training montage. There's multiple times where this happens where the gunslinger, you could see him training, but you don't spend a whole lot of time with that, which I liked. It was just enough for you to kind of see that there's been this ongoing training to get them up to gunslinger status. And then he lets them loose at some point in the story, and we'll get there, where they have to, be without their master, their mentor. And I really liked that, because what I was concerned with is we were going to go from the drawing of the 3 to now you got these badass people that are just going around shooting from the hip, but we didn't. We kind of see them progress, and we see the effects of that training as well on them as characters. So we've got Jake now, and we'll talk about how Jake gets there. I wanted to see more of that same mentorship with Jake, and I didn't get that here. So Jeff, was that a disappointment for you, having enjoyed that kind of thing in the book?
I'm going to reserve my comments because I will have thoughts on this in a later book, and then I will unleash my tongue at that point.
Poker face time.
All right. Well, Mazza and Jeff can't say anything, but Steve, did you care to see more of that relationship between Roland and Jake?
Yes, I wish we would have had more. And it seemed kind of like when they met up with each other, it was kind of like, we're here together now, so everything's great. And it's just like, well, wait a minute, like that seems kind of abrupt. But I did enjoy the Jake's. My favorite part of the book was probably Jake in school, and
Yeah.
the voices he was hearing. That was all really interesting, and I do wish that I hadn't ever seen those pictures, because just with Stephen King, you see the pictures of the big turtle and the world on it, and there's some things that Jake discovers during those times that I wish I hadn't known or hadn't seen before. I wish I had gone into this fresh, because I wish I would have been able to imagine it myself, and it would have been a better experience, I think, if I had not seen or heard of the turtle and all this other stuff. And I still don't really know I still don't know the whole story behind it, but I wish I would have just went into this fresh and not knowing anything about it. So, but yeah, I did enjoy the Jake's story before they met up. I thought that was the funnest part of the book, and the he went out and he ran away and he left his class and he went to just searching, and I thought that was all really fun.
Mm-hmm. And then
That's interesting.
He picked up Charlie the choo-choo when he was like out there looking.
You actually have a copy of that book.
Yeah.
By Beryl Evans too, no doubt.
Nice.
So that is interesting. That is the author of that book.
Mm-hmm.
That is a real fan right there, Maz.
So I got to ask Mazza, because I've never read that. Is it word for word from the story that we see in? Because he tells the story of Charlie the Choo Choo, but it's almost like, I don't know if we're seeing the text of it or he's kind of summarizing the story,
It's
and all that.
It's word for word. Like when I got to that point, I brought out my little book and I just read it, and then it's like literally word for word, like everything's on here, and then the pictures are like great too. Like it's like a little kid book, but if you read The Wastelands, it's not a little kid, because even the little kids in the train, they look like they're having fun, but if you pay close attention, they're not. They're miserable. Like from far away, it's like, oh yeah, look at that train. He looks so like friendly, but bruh, no.
So story time at Maz's house.
I'm saving this one for my son. Like when he grows up to be like maybe like 8, I'll read it to him. Be like, what did you think about that? And he's probably gonna be like, oh, that was a great story. But I was like, no, it's not. But
And you'll wonder why he has night terrors.
that's what I'm scared for him to come in here and start like just being like, Dad, can I read some of your Stephen King books? And I feel like there's some that he'll be able to read, and then there's some other ones that I'm just like, no, wait till you're like 15 or something. But I've seen like 11, 12-year-olds start reading Stephen King, and they turn out great. So
Yeah, I was one of them.
yeah. I think there is some books that you're kind of like, no, like you shouldn't be reading this. Like even like, I don't know, like so he has some hard hitters. Like even a scene in this book, I was just kind of like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll get to that later, but
Yeah. But did you guys kind of feel like the whole connection between Jake and Roland was kind of, what's the word? Like it felt real, but at the same time, I feel like Stephen King. Maybe I'm doing this because I'm trying to be like start to write, and I saw it from like a writer's point of view. Like, did he add that part to make it more credible and more like real? Because I felt like he needed to have a way for like Jake to kind of know how to get to the other side, kind of thing. I don't know. It's like a whole dilemma. I feel like he needed to figure out his plot hole, because we know that Jake kind of was gonna end up at the other side, but then how did Roland kind of know? I don't know if that makes sense.
Ka-tet. Well, although he does say that
Yeah.
he's only adjacently in the ka-tet, right? That Eddie, Susanna, and Jake are the true ka-tet. They have what's it called? The kef?
Yes.
Yeah. But Roland shows, and I actually marked off that section where they all have the conversation and tell the stories up to the point that they're there. So they all can, mainly I think for Jake's, for Jake to know where they all came from and how they got to that point. And they all do it as part of they have that parlay or whatever it's called. But I think that's one of the things that Roland isn't quite sure of, because he's like, I shouldn't have been able to talk to Jake, and he questions that, and that's when he's later in the book, and we'll get there, where he eventually has to. It's almost like he really was always part of the ka-tet, but he never really wanted to be connected, right? Because he knew that there's a good chance he's going to have to let them go. Just like he did Jake the first time, even though he makes a promise never to let go again. I think Roland is afraid to really be too attached, because he knows, even though he doesn't really want, I think deep down he doesn't really want it to be the case, but the Dark Tower, his journey to Dark Tower is ultimately, whatever he has to do to get there. And he's proven time and time again that is true. Eddie's called him on it multiple times. And I think that's what it is. I think Roland keeps telling himself that he's not really part of the ka-tet. But as you mentioned there, Maza, he's connected. Is it just Jake? Is there something that some connection that he has with just Jake? I don't think so. I think Jake was the one that he really was keeping at a distance, even more so. But he knew that he was going to die if Jake didn't come back, right? The two voices in his head were not going to shut up until they ultimately came back. And it was same thing would happen to Jake, right? He even says to Eddie, is it okay? Because what I'm going through right now, there's a little boy who's going through the same thing. So I like
connections. Yeah, and connections are key. I think we see a lot of connections throughout this, whether, coincidence or connections, but, the bookstore is owned by Calvin Tower. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Eddie and Jake crossed paths in the 70s, when Eddie was a younger boy. And so there's bigger things at work there that I think both on a coincidence level, but also just this like spiritual connection that they have to each other. I just kind of took it as like, they're connected. This is how it works in this world.
So Summer says here, part 2, chapter 3, I loved how Jake's teacher talks about how he should read The Lord of the Flies. A good novel is often like a series of riddles within riddles. And then Brandy says, I was confused with all the riddles and the Charlie the Choo-Choo and the Tower, the bookstore guy. It did all clear up, but it was a little frustrating wondering where it was going. I had the same issue. I was like, okay, I know there's a purpose to this, but I don't really know where it's going. And it's like, can you just, tell me he picked up these books and then move on, and then tell me why he picked up the books later. But we're sitting there going through the story, and I'm like, man, do I have to remember all this stuff? Because I'm not going to remember this story.
Well, that's the thing. I think for some people it's frustrating about King, but he fleshes out everything and he takes his time along this journey. Like we know about Jake's parents. His dad's this TV executive with a short fuse, and he does cocaine. He's got his little white powder, and his mom, gets stoned on Valium, and his lovers, and he misses Greta Shaw. He's got he just expands and expands and expands and makes this world real. And for some readers, it's like, I got to get to point B to point C to point D. And other people just enjoy that journey because you're in the texture of everything. It's not just like zip, right along the surface. You're mired into the world that has been created for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think normally that wouldn't be a problem for me. But I also know that there's a lot of stuff happening below the surface with these books, even in other Stephen King books, but especially here, that I felt like, okay, is this important, or is this just one of those things that helps me, connect more with Jake as a character? Do I need to remember this? I mean, it was either tab every single page in this book or just accept the fact that I wasn't going to know all of the connections and just enjoy the story. It was very hard for me, knowing what we're coming into this conversation, for me to just kind of accept what I was reading and allow it to be absorbed organically, or really analyze it to know, is this going to be important later on in the story? I think that's
can I, without spoiling something, can I say it can be both. it can be both. Like there are things that can be important later on, but you don't have to like tab them and analyze them, and it will. Steve's good enough to not you, Steve. Uncle Steve.
Uncle Steve.
Is good enough to weave it back in and help you along. So it can be both, Stacy. So don't worry, don't stress. Sorry, Steve. I think it's there.
No, it's okay. On the side, like the side routes we take, and you wonder if they're just dead ends or if they mean something. Sometimes it feels like he's showing off. Like King just shows off his ability, which is fine. But it's like, okay, why do we have to go on? Why do we have to have this 10-page conversation with these two men from this bookstore and hear them talk? Which, well, it's okay and everything, but another thing is especially on those types of scenes, it did feel very 80s. It felt like, and not in a negative way, it just felt like you were in the late 80s, early 90s. I got that vibe reading this. I don't know if any of you did too, just because maybe it was written during that time, but I did get that very 80s movie type of feeling from it.
I think it was. I mean, Jake's time is the 70s. I think he's like 77, 78, something like that. But I think this was literally written in the mid 80s when Stephen King was at his Stephen King-ish, ness of, master of horror 80s, I think you're probably picking up on something there, Steve.
I feel like for me, sometimes with the whole with his books, like his older stuff, I struggle a lot with the references. So I have to Google a lot of stuff. Like, for example, I started like Googling the songs that he talks about, and some of them are pretty catchy and pretty good. And then other stuff, I just can't find it anywhere. So I struggle with the references sometimes. That's why I feel like I enjoy his newer stuff a lot more, just because I'm like, oh, I know what you're talking about now. But yeah, later, like you said, like the 70s or 80s, I was just like, I didn't really see the change of it. But I feel like if you were in those times, like you would see it and you'd be like, oh, look, I remember this. But also I feel like I see in the comments someone talking about, yeah, right there, King goes on tangents. And I feel like that's the main reason. Like every time I'm telling people, read Stephen King, they're like, no, I don't want to, because, and I give them all these reasons and they're like, no, it's not even because of his whatever, it's because of his tangents. I don't want to know about something that happened with his girlfriend like 10 years ago, and like then he went somewhere else and he was backpacking through Europe. I don't want to know that. I just want to get through point A to point B. And I'm like, but that's the fun of it. Like that's like the whole. I can see it, but I feel like you're just put into like this world and you're following each character. And I feel like I agree with Steve. Sometimes I feel like King does do this whole like kind of like, look what I can do. I can write a whole scene of just two people in a bookstore of just talking about random stuff, and you'll enjoy it.
I did enjoy it. Like to me, it gives it texture. Like I love that stuff. Even though this book isn't my favorite of the series, I love those little side jaunts. I love the story of Charlie the Choo Choo and Engineer Bob through Jake's eyes as he's kind of reading it. I love the Calvin Tower and Aaron Deepno stuff in the bookstore, and River Crossing stuff. I don't know, felt a little bogged down to me, but. I'm on this for the journey, but I'm like that anyway. I'm a slow burn kind of reader, show watcher, movie watcher type person. I don't mind the journey. The cynical, possibly cynical writer side of me says, maybe he's trying to fill out some page count because apparently Stephen King sells by the pound. And B, maybe as a writer, part of the writing process is you have to figure out your way. Like a lot of times I will start, when I'm writing, I have a kind of beginning, middle, and maybe a sort of quasi end in mind. And I have to figure my way along as I go. So some of the ways I do that is I have characters have conversations with each other, interact with each other, do a little side tangent. And yes, it fills up pages, but also it helps you and the characters find your way to that next plot point.
Yep.
Brandy's
comment here. Steve says he got 80s vibe when they were carrying Susanna Yoda.
Tell me no one else thought of that when he was carrying her around. Tell me no one else thought of that.
No, and not until you bring it up. Every time I read it, I'm going to think about it.
Brandy and I had like a 15-minute conversation about how that was just like, and we tried to figure out what year it was written in. And we tried, well, was Star Wars popular then? And we were trying to figure out when Star Wars was like popular. And we thought it might have been like a wink and a nod, to Star Wars. Like, I see you, Yoda. But
As a Star Wars fan, I am ashamed. I did not see that. I forgot the face of my father.
For shame. For shame.
I honestly, Susanna's such a force to be reckoned with in this book that I kept forgetting she had no legs. I mean, she's pretty strong personality that until they remind you they're pushing her in a wheelchair, or Roland's carrying her across a narrow, broken bridge, which I had a hard time imagining this woman on his shoulders while he's trying to cross this thing. Oh man, it was now I'm gonna picture Yoda every time.
I also like this book because we got to see a little bit more flavor from both characters. Like we get to see Eddie like throwing a lot more jokes, which I love. And then, like you said, Susanna just being like that. Like I feel like she's kind of like the backbone, even though her backbone doesn't really work. But but I feel like she's like the one. Like how every time you hear someone say a strong man has a strong woman behind him, I feel like that's literally Susanna, because she's always behind one of them.
Yeah. And I think she is what I love most about her character is that she's the perfect mixture of Odetta and Detta.
Yeah.
And she even acknowledges that in the book. And whenever she has to, really get I don't even want to say angry, but just ornery, she turns into Detta. And her vernacular changes. I love that about her. But very rarely does she go back to being Odetta, and she even says she hates that bitch. That snobby bitch.
Yeah, Detta is one of the best characters. I agree.
Yeah, I'm here to
so even Summer admits she didn't picture it. Steve, you're all by yourself.
I don't even like Star Wars. How did I
Steve, you
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Sorry.
Come on.
So Brandy brought up a really good point here about Eddie's childhood and his relationship with his brother. I did think that was interesting. You knew from the first, from Drawing of the Three, that he and his brother had a very unique relationship, and you kind of knew the reason why. I mean, you find out about his sister, and but you see a little bit more now. Eddie's kind of acknowledging that maybe wasn't such a great relationship, and he's starting to let go of that. And I loved that, and I loved how Roland kind of was had that intuition that Eddie was going through that struggle, but let him go through it, but was there at times to help him. I really liked the relationship between Roland and Eddie. It changes a lot in this book.
But didn't it feel a little bit more like Roland was always like, he never really gave him a clear answer. Like it was never yes or no. It was always like a gray kind of thing for him. Like Eddie would tell him, "Hey, this is happening, blah blah," and then Roland would be like, "One day you'll know." Like it's like what? Like I want to know now. Like give me the answer now. Like Roland, I picture Roland as like those guys that like you go up for advice and he gives you advice but not really, and you're just like, wait, what?
What?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when we come to these discussions, those of us who have never read this, and we ask a question and Jeff goes, "You'll find out."
Put on my poker face. Bad poker face.
Hey, yeah, exactly like that. That's what Roland would be. Jeff is the Roland basically right now. Like asking him stuff, and then Roland's just like, just keep going. Like you'll figure it out.
I'm the din of our ka-tet.
So let's talk about when they finally get to, what was the name of the city that they were going to? I know it's supposed to look like New York.
Lud.
Thank you. That's kind of an important part. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. So let's talk about when our lovely ka-tet gets to Lud and everything they experience there. This, to me, was the ultimate splitting up of the fellowship trope, but I loved it. How did you guys feel about Roland and Jake's adventure versus Eddie and Susanna's? in Lud. Raise your hand. Don't all talk at once.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how we bring Jake back in?
Oh, well, yeah, we kind of skipped over that. We're already at 50 minutes here. We could talk for hours about this book.
We can just say I found it surprising how, like, I don't know, what did you think, Jeff and Steve and Stacy? Like, do you think the whole demon and then the demon and the Susanna was more like a shock factor, or was it more of like it brought something to the story? I have my own opinion on it. What do you guys think?
Is this what you were talking about earlier, Steve? You have thoughts on what happened in the speaking ring there?
It was one of those, because Brandy was ahead of me reading it, and she kept asking me, "Where are you in that book?" Because it's really weird, and I couldn't get it out of her. Like, why are you asking? She said, "Just, I'll wait till you get there." And then I read it, and I looked at her, and I was like, "You were talking about this demon, weren't you?" She's like, "Isn't that so weird?" So I think there's going to be a point to it later, because they kind of hint at it a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. It was kind of. There was another scene. I think it was in the Gunslinger that. Was the Gunslinger? There was a scene in the Gunslinger.
Yeah.
I forget what exactly. It was similar. So I wonder if there's some kind of theme going on there or something. But yeah, it was a little bit.
What
jarring.
specifically? Because I'm trying to remember what you're.
When the demon was on top of Odetta.
Oh, that part. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, because when I read it the first time, I was also kind of like shocked. But not the reading it the second time, I kind of admire how like Stephen King made a scene so vivid. Like you can literally see everything going on, and it's like you have like this demon like with Odetta, then you have Eddie over here trying to bring Jake back, and then Roland trying to help Odetta, and it's like, bro, like what is going on? But like the first time I kind of got lost. The second time around, I got the whole scope, the whole scene, and I was just like, I felt like I was just there at the scene, just staring everywhere. And it's like, oh, there's a lot going on here. And I enjoyed it a lot more the second time. It is kind of like, I feel like Stephen King does this a lot where he gives you like this big shock factor using like sex, because I feel like in our society, we're kind of like see sex kind of like this, like, I don't know. It's like, oh, we kind of, I don't know how to explain it. Like for example, I was talking to this about with the House of Dragons, where like we try to sexualize everything, and it's like when, like, for example, the people in Africa, like they walk around like naked and stuff like that, and then over here, if someone were to do that, we'd be like, oh, what are you doing? Like you're not supposed to do that. So like it's kind of like the mentality of how you read this whole scene. But I feel like if you think of sex as being something like kind of bad, it gives you that whole sense of like it doesn't make sense. But now going back the second time, it kind of made a lot more sense of why he put that in there. It's more of like, I don't know. Help me out, Jeff, because I'm going on a tangent here too.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. When Steve asked us there's a theme, it was basically the polar opposite of what happened in the Gunslinger. So it's definitely these elemental forces, these demons. That's their hook in or whatever. Also, Gasher Man was a pedophile. You know, he had designs on Jake. So there's definitely, I think, a connection of, just this malevolence that's attached to it. There's definitely some shock value there. That scene was hard to read, interesting to read.
Yeah, I blocked out most of it.
Clearly, like you didn't even remember it, Stacey.
Like, what are you talking about? What demon?
Brandy has a good point, and I think when I first read it, I was like, "That's true." Because is it from the demon or is it from Eddie?
I don't know. I guess we got to keep going. I didn't even think about it until she said it.
Let's like start to like put our guesses in. What do you guys think it is? You guys think it's gonna be a demon child, or you guys think it's gonna be Eddie's child, and it's gonna help Roland get to the tower or something? I don't know. What do you think, Steve?
I have no idea, to be honest.
I'd go for like a demon child. I feel like it was a demon's child. What about you, Stacy?
I want to say it's Eddie's, just because I don't want it to be. But it won't be nearly as interesting of a story. Although it could be, because, you know, becoming parents, as you know, Maza, really changes a lot of priorities. How is that going to affect Eddie's priorities? I mean, he's now committed to going to the tower. He wants to see the tower. But will having a child, change that? How is Roland going to deal with that?
How would they,
So
I would
it
love
could
to
be
see
very
how-
interesting.
I would love to see how King does like the whole labor thing for Susanna, unless he just skips over the whole thing and he starts the book off saying, "Oh, they had a baby."
Well, here's the funny thing, and maybe we've got a little foreshadowing of this, but when they talked about why they shouldn't stay the night in River Crossing, because if you stay one night, then you're going to feel bad about eating their food, and then maybe you can fix a broken window, and then you can go get and you're right. Eddie is committed to the tower. Susanna seems committed to the tower. Roland's clearly committed to the tower. What happens when you bring a child in that, Maza, your focus instantly changes to protect, nurture, help,
Yeah.
that, could that baby be the river crossing of, if we could just stop until the baby is a little bit older, maybe if he's walking, you start to have these, excuses, and it's too cold for the baby. That those types of conflicts could definitely come up.
Yep.
Interesting.
So Summer here says that she was upset about the demon until Roland said he would have sex if it was a female. Yeah, and then she said, well, what if it prefers both? And he's like, then we'll both have sex with it. Detta came in and did what she would do to the white boy back in the day. Yeah, I wasn't so upset about that because it really showed Odetta or Susanna took control, right? A lot of people will say, oh, why is this in here? It's sexist, it's misogynist, but it would only be that if she was the victim. She was not a victim, right? She did what she had to do as part of the ka-tet to do what needed to be done to move on or do the next steps. And I applaud her for doing what she had to do. I don't think it had anything to do with sex. More, it had everything to do with what she had the power to do. I'm sorry, I'm rambling here, but I didn't see it so much as, oh, she's, practically being raped by a demon, as much as I saw it as her holding the demon back in whatever way or fashion she could. To protect.
She turned the tables. At the end, the demon was like, whoa, let me out of here. She took the power. She had the power. And that was what that was all about.
I'm saying she thinks so. She thinks it's the demon. So am I the only one who, well, you can't say anything, Jeff, but am I the only one who's hoping and praying it's Eddie's family?
I'm with Brandy on this one, yeah.
Hey, Ash. I don't think Ashley's read these books. I hope we're not ruining everything to it. Yeah, I can see if it is a demon child, Eddie's the kind of guy that's just going to be like, I'll take care of it. It's my baby too.
What's interesting, though, is that we know about Susanna, but she has kept it from everyone else to this point. Like, she knows. Well, she's kind of in denial. She's like, well, it just happens, indigestion or whatever. But
was I the only one who was totally oblivious to all the things she was saying until she put her hand on her stomach at the very last? I was like, oh my God, all that stuff she was saying earlier. I'm such an idiot.
Yeah, I didn't catch it till then either.
But that'll be interesting too, because now we have a secret in our group that only one of them knows this little secret is in there.
Well, Roland knows a lot of stuff that we don't know either.
True.
Summer here says, I was worried about the damage a demon could do to so. Yeah, and I think there was some, she even says that it was not a pleasant experience. But then, a bear almost ate Eddie, and Jake and Roland almost died at the hands of some crazy, weird greys. So,
Jake almost got eaten by a house.
Yeah, so everyone's gone through their own thing. Ashley's not getting spoiled. She says she just wanted to be here with us. Yay!
We got to the trope that you were talking about, Stacey, where like we each get to see them go off, and I feel like I found Roland and Jake's side a little bit more interesting than than Susanna's and Eddie's, just because I feel like in Jake's and Roland's we get kind of like introduced to more characters, but we also get left in a cliffhanger. Like, did that guy die or did he not die?
Mm-hmm.
Because it seemed kind of like they left them for dead, but they never, like, I don't ever remember like reading King saying the guy died, like he dead.
Well,
No.
he actually says he didn't die because it just scraped his scalp, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
then Richard Fannin
yeah,
came to rescue him. Richard Fannin. Just leaving that there. Other constant readers might pick up on it. I don't know.
I haven't. I guess I need to read more. It sounds familiar, but it's almost sounds like Randall Flagg, which is the only reason why it sounds familiar to me. But yeah, that whole part was interesting because now you've always the world up until this point has kind of been the bad guy, the big bad. They're fighting to survive this world through this book, and even in the drawing of the three. But now you've got something that's building up to be an antithesis of the gunslinger, a true antagonist. And so I'm excited to see where things go. Because even Blaine the Train is not a real villain. He's just, a psychotic
creepy
program.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Jake and Roland's experience you were talking about. So what was his name? Was his name?
Oh, the pedophile?
No, not Gasher, but the main dude.
TikTok man.
TikTok man. He is an interesting character, is he not? And so he was kind of a villain in this story, but not a particularly powerful one, right? He was just crazy, much like Blaine. Mm-hmm. But now he's been given an opportunity to really step up as a big boss man with this new fella's Fannin's help. But up until that point, so I'm rambling here, you guys. I'm so sorry. That whole scene. So Brandy said earlier in the chat that she was really worried about Jake and Oi. And so all these things happen. You've got Roland getting involved. You have a lot of things that kind of happen in this. But yes, for me, it was all about, is Oi going to die?
Poor Oi.
Roland's even like, yeah, why don't you go? He's going to be my little. He was like his David the Hawk. I think Roland was perfectly willing to sacrifice Oi for Jake, but also only I think because Oi was also willing to sacrifice himself for Jake. Like that Billy Bumbler loves Jake.
Yes. Oh, I loved that. I am an absolute fool. If you put an animal in any book, I'll read it. I will love that animal. And if you kill that animal, I will hate you.
Yeah, I know companions are the best.
But he's smart too. He's and always kind of interesting because he does talk a little bit, so he can communicate. He understands. He seems to understand more than your average dog. I do love, but he can count. That's a good point. Yeah, he can count. He is, to me, he's like the original Jar Jar Binks. Like he was so annoying to his own pack that they like kicked him out.
He talked too much.
And I felt, he felt so bad when he had to bite Jake's hand to keep from falling. You could tell he felt bad, and always a good little guy. Good fellow.
Stop saying was, because now you're making me think something.
I mean, in what we read, he is a good boy.
Okay. So Brandy, the TikTok man, was he a pirate for some reason? And maybe it was mentioned I saw him as a pirate type. That's a good point.
The scavengers. I feel like they have to scavenge what they have around themselves. Like again, the wastelands, like everything that's there is dead basically. And I thought it was really cool how he Kim brings up the like nuclear plants that are still there, but no one knows how to maneuver them. And if someone knew how to maneuver them, they'd basically control everything. And that's why he wants them so bad, so he can rule basically that whole area. And that's like where you start to see like this is dystopian, because you get to see if someone knows how to control these nuclear things, like they're basically control everything.
Yeah, to me, the whole journey through Lud, through the stacks of junk and then down in the manhole covers and the booby traps that were set, that's very cinematic to me. Like if and when this ever comes to screen, that's going to be great to see these cars and buses piled up, and all of these kind of that post-apocalyptic cityscape that these people are just kind of like entropy is, they don't know what any of this stuff does. Like Mazda said, they don't know how to run any of this, but they're just kind of living in the refuse of what once was. And I do have to say, did anybody take the time to go listen to Velcro Fly by ZZ Top? I love ZZ Top, but that song is god awful. Holy
I did. Yeah.
It is so synth. Like it's funny that they mentioned the drums. Like ZZ Top has a lot of great drum beats and they're known for their drum. I think the lead singer was the drummer of the band, and someone who knows ZZ Top better than me can correct me, but the drums on that as being the prominent thing, these war drums that Blaine would play to like whip up the grays and the pubes into a fight, they're like drum machine drums. They're like they're horrible. They're not even real drums.
No wonder they thought it was the ghost in the machine coming for them.
Yeah, I would have jumped in the wood chipper too if I listened to that all the time.
I like how Joseph is reminding us how he would say his name. Ache.
The audiobook for this, I mean, Drawing the Three was good, but this one, so many more characters in it, so it was I think a more difficult book to narrate, but it was amazing. When I finished the audiobook, everything I read, including like reading something on a screen, I kept hearing in Frank Mueller's voice.
He is the best. He's so amazing.
It's sad. I did not realize that he had passed before he got to finish narrating the series, so that's sad.
When does he stop, Jeff?
Book 4 is the last we get with Frank Mueller, and then George Goodell, who did The Gunslinger, takes over again at book 5.
Yeah, because when I did book 4, I could still hear him, and then I was like, so that means book 5 must be it.
Yeah, he had a motorcycle accident first, so he lost his ability to. I don't know if he lost his ability to speak, but he couldn't speak well enough to narrate, so he lost his livelihood. And Stephen King set up a foundation for him, and then he eventually did pass as a result of his injuries down the road.
That's awful. So Brandy says here, did anyone else chuckle to themselves a little at the word pubes? Sorry, my inner 12-year-old came out. Yes, I did. I also chuckled when you find out why they're called pubes, because even though they're all old, they are the younger of the older people. I really thought that was interesting, how you have this world where children are very rare, if they exist at all, and it's really, run by all these, geriatric folk. And I thought that was interesting. What also is interesting is, was it me, or did it seem like they live an awfully long time? Like they're old, but they've been old for a really long time. Did anybody else like what is happening in this world where these people are, 80s for, 80 years?
I think they made a comment about that. But I think they said about how they've been alive for a long time, but the end is near or something like that. Or am I thinking? I think that was in this town.
I'm just really interested to find out what has happened to this world. They keep saying it moved on. You get a little hints here and there that it could be something, and then something happens. You're like, okay, so it wasn't that thing I first thought. So is interesting. It's like a magic bomb went off somewhere.
Like they're in like a big pause, just waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, like the world moved on, but where's it going?
Yeah.
Well, it's just dying. It's that blade of grass that Roland saw when he was, on the other side of the mountain in the Gunslinger. It's their whole world is a blade of grass. It's just eventually shriveling and drying up and dying. So, and drifting apart too. We found out too. It's drifting. Like the portal of the bear and the turtle are farther apart than they were, and time is off and direction is off. They can't tell. Like this whole world is basically like dissolving.
I have to say, I always thought when we were reading in the Drawing of the Three that Eddie and Susanna came from worlds similar to ours, but different worlds from each other. But now you see that Jake and Eddie actually come from the same world because they meet, or is in an alternative world where Eddie exists. And then it's the time paradox thing again. It's like, well, that was a world where Jake survives, where Eddie is, so it's not necessarily the same world Eddie came from, because Eddie came from the world where Jake was not living, because at that time, Roland had not yet saved Jake.
When I picture in my head too, now that Stacy's saying that aloud, it's kind of like, what the heck? But yeah, it makes completely sense if you know what she's talking about. But I feel like if no one has ever read the book, you'd be like, what the heck? But yeah, that makes
you wonder why Eddie doesn't remember him, right? He says, Jake says that he tried not to be noticed, but did Eddie not remember him because he wasn't really there? Because that was the world where Jake died.
Or do you remember some random kid you saw outside of a store when you were 13?
Yeah, all the time, all of them. I know all of them.
I can every face. Got them right in my head. Well, I think we do. So Blaine introduces the concept of levels of the tower. So there could be a little bit of multiverse in that too. And he talks about like a musical instrument that's played on one level of the tower. So there maybe there could be a multiverse aspect to that the Eddie and Henry that Jake see could be the exact same, or perhaps they're different. Although Eddie does remember going by the house on Dutch Hill, like he does remember those same events around that.
But he doesn't remember the house on the Dutch Hill being destroyed. You think he would remember something like that?
True, because he was still around for like 10 more years in his New York.
We're already at 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I know we all have a lot more to talk about, but I don't want to take up everybody's time here on this wonderful Saturday. I almost said Sunday because yesterday was a super long day for me. So I invite all of you to jump on to the creepingdeath.org forum. There is if there's not, I will create a thread on there for the Wasteland, so you can continue to discuss the book and all of your ideas. And, if you have questions that you want us to answer, just drop them there and we will give you our very long and drawn out thoughts, I'm sure. Thank you, Mazza, Steve, and Jeff for joining me here today. And all of those who have joined to watch, I really appreciate it. And before we wrap up, I'm going to say I gave this 4.5 stars. I know Steve's probably going, what? No. But it was a little bit better than the Drawing of the Three. I gave Drawing of the Three 4 stars, so this was a 4.5 star book for me. Mazza, second time round, was it?
It's 4.5. So it's like I said, I keep holding out. Like I know Jeff's like, who's not letting you give out 5 stars, but I'm gonna give it 4.5 again because I'm holding my 5 stars. I only have so many, Jeff. Okay, let me borrow some of yours. Because I remember last time I said that he was like giving me trouble. He was like, "Why can't you give out more than like 4 stars? Like you do know you have like an unlimited amount of stars, right?"
Infinite stars, yes. Why is everybody holding back their stars?
Steve, was this a 3 star for you?
Yeah, 3 star.
Yeah.
It was
I think Brandy also gave it 3.
No, she'll give it 4. I know some people
Oh,
see
4?
3 I know some people see 3 and they're like, "Whoa, wait a minute."
Mhm.
But 3 is still good. Like 3 is good. I
That's
enjoyed
true.
it. It was fine. 2 is, it wasn't for me, and then 1 is like it was crap. But this is just
Yeah.
for me. So
4 stars for Jeremy as well. So Jeff, you're all alone in your 5-star world, but I know that this was 5-star. Is there any of the books in the Dark Tower that don't earn a 5-star for you?
No, well, I mean, probably. I have a hard time rating stuff anyway, but I will say 3 is not my favorite. But have faith for those of you that are like Steve. If you're starting to lose a little momentum on this, my 2 favorite books are coming up. Not to like set the bar too high, but I love the stretch that we're heading into. And keep in mind, we left off on a cliffhanger, so
Yeah, he left us on a big clip.
Yeah, we didn't even get to talk about the riddles and
Yeah.
much about Blaine, but I'm excited to see
But I
how
feel like
much of the next book is going to be just riddles, though. I hope not a lot.
well, I think we left it at a good point just because it picks up where we left off, and I feel like the riddles and all that can tie in with book 4. So I feel like we left it in a good spot because we're still with the train basically at the beginning of book 4.
yeah, and even though this is a 3 for me, I'm still good. I'm still feeling really good about the series. So it's I have to keep in mind this is a long series. It's not going to all happen
There's
right away.
7 books.
7
8, right?
and then an 8 that he wrote after the fact that is supposed to go between
Oh, okay.
4 and 5, I think.
So
That's
are
the
you
one
guys
we're doing at the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody here, except for Steve, loved it.
I liked it. It was fine. 3 is still
But
good.
he also doesn't like Star Wars, so his judgment, we may want to, question that a little bit.
That's fair. Yeah. Star Wars is fine. I've never been a huge Star Wars fan. The prequels like soured me on the whole thing. So
Yeah, they don't count.
yeah.
The movie started at episode 4. Anybody here who would like to join us for book 4, Mazza will be hosting that on his channel next month. Go check out, like I said, the creepingdeath.org. It is linked in the description below. You'll find our schedule for all of our shows, including the Dark Tower, and there are lots of other content in there that you could check out, including Brandy's blog. So you can go and check out her blog as well. Thank you all for coming today. See you next time. Bye.